Hey Raghunath, tell everyone about our Patreon community.
Sure, Kaustubha. The Wisdom of the Sages Patreon community is an incredible online yoga resource. If you like the type of yoga wisdom and culture we share on the show, then our Patreon community is a great next step. This is a listener-supported podcast, and any level of sponsorship will unlock a wide range of live and archived classes, talks, and even workshops.
Raghunath teaches, I teach, and we have a host of other excellent teachers on topics ranging from yoga philosophy, asana classes, storytelling, Ayurveda, kirtan, cooking, meditation, and a lot more.
We even have an incredible online Bhakti 12-step recovery group.
So if you want to check it out, go to patreon.com/wisdom of the sages.
All right, let's get it on.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Live from Beaver, Pennsylvania. This is Wisdom of the Sages, a daily yoga podcast with your host Raghunath and co-host and senior educator at the Bhakti Center, Kaustubha Das. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Beaver. It's a dry town. No drinking allowed here in Beaver, Pennsylvania. Isn't it interesting there's still dry towns out there? I'm in a dry town now.
Never even heard of that before.
You never heard of dry town? It's a thing. It was
I guess
like
I've
these
heard of it.
old laws, and they're dry. You can't.
It means they don't have any bars.
You can't serve alcohol in restaurants, and it's a dry town. Yeah,
All right.
It's like the Prohibition.
Prohibition era.
Yeah, the good
Is
old.
Beaver a town or is it like a county? I thought it was a county.
Well, it's an animal, and it's
I know
a
that.
town, and it's a
Right.
town, and it's a town. It's a charming little town that I think specializes in charmingness and fracking.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm here, and today I'm teaching at Zeb's Studio, Yoga Factory in Pittsburgh. I taught at Sangha last night, and we're getting all our Pittsburgh people reuniting, which is a whole crew of them. They're really very cool, including Mel Veda, who's here today. And I met Andrea Kay. She's a regular. She's an other. She used to be a Zoomer. Now she's an other because she's dealing with kids at home and school, and I don't know how parents are dealing with it, but appreciate it. So it's question day. If you're new to this, welcome. Saturday it's question day. We take in questions from the audience. If you have a question on your spiritual journey, you can write us at wisdomofthesages108@gmail.com. Get a lot of questions, but, write them in, especially next week. We're having 2 sets of question days because next week we're having a special guest for our Sunday who is Michael Cremo, also known as Druta Karmadas, and he specializes in the ideas behind Vedic cosmology, life on other planets, and how it ties in with the Vedas. So if you have your UFO questions, write them in, address it for, I guess you can just put UFO in the subject.
That'll work.
Because we're going to save those questions, because I want to answer people's questions about UFOs, cosmology, multidimensional
What about
universe,
archaeology,
flat
and
Earth,
evolution?
archaeology, all the stuff that is like conspiracy theories. It's all going to come to life. We're going to shine light on the conspiracy and what's true, what's made up, and what do the Vedas say about it. Alien beings, shape-shifting, all that stuff Kaustubha loves.
You're twisting it, Robert. He's a scientist. The man is like he's
like a scientist,
done
but
research and stuff, like real stuff, right?
Well, real shape-shifting
It's
is a real
not
thing.
all-
Hanuman
but it's-
shape-shifted, man.
But I'm saying, it's not all about shape shifting. It's like
No,
you
it's
look
not-
at him and you
not
just say shape shift.
No, I'm thinking these things on the fringe with fringy people like myself we're interested in them. But that happens to be spoken about in the Vedas. Why not talk about it? Why not bring in a professional?
I'm down to talk about it.
Yeah,
I'm just
other
saying there's
dimensional.
more to him than you know that. And
Yeah, there's much more to them. He's a very deep, very sincere soul, and he's got a very interesting following. Just look him up on Facebook, Michael Cremo, Cremo. But anyway, we're excited for that. So write in your questions, and right now we're going to dive right into our questions, unless you guys have any announcements about anything.
what's going on today, Mara?
We have a Bhakti recovery group meeting around 9:30 or so.
So if you're new to this whole thing, we have a whole online platform where people who want to support what we're doing. This is community-based. You can give us a give us a monthly pledge of your choice. And we have a whole online yoga school to join, filled with lots of workshops on yoga theory, Ayurveda, meditation, cooking, etc. And then we also have like a 12-step Bhakti recovery group. 12-step is like a parallel group to Bhakti. It's like understanding you're a part of something bigger, but it's just giving a little bit more meaning to the higher power. So we found a lot of people in recovery really love this program, and they listen to the show anyway. And so we set it up for them with the help of a few dedicated servants. Okay. So
I hear that they're doing great too. I spoke with Jiva yesterday. Said it's really happening.
It's empowering, and it really helps people, and people need a platform to just share and just to talk and how they feel, and also just to listen. It's important just to listen to other people going through a hard time, because the tendency is to think like, oh, my life, only I'm going through a hard time. And it's just not true. The whole world struggles in the material world. And if they're not struggling, give them time. It's only a matter of time before we struggle. And that's why that's why the Bhagavatam pushes such a deep message. Like, look, we're not here to fix your material problems. That being said, by just controlling your senses, regulating your life, it will mitigate a lot of the pain of the material world. But ultimately, you're not going to beat material nature. You're not going to beat Mother Kali. Material nature is basically taking everything away from us, including our health. There's these people that get into these longevity. I'm taking these longevity herbs. Who cares? How long are you going to live with your longevity herbs? 110 years? 94 years? Come on. So ideally, our real thing we got to hold on to is our spiritual banister, our spiritual lifeline. And that's going to be there whether the material world is looking good for you or whether the storms of the material world are raining down hard on you.
Right.
So, my friend, the first question, Kaustubha Ji, is for both of us.
Okay.
I'll read it to you.
Who's it coming from?
It's coming from a person named
Emil.
Emil or Emil? Emil.
Emil?
Emil?
Emil or Emil.
I
It's
would say
Emil, but
It's Emil via email.
Via email. That's a tongue twister.
Emil?
I'd like to
I don't know.
thank Raghunath, Kaustubha, and Mara, and everyone who makes this podcast what it is. Pure healing medicine for the soul. Thank you for making Bhakti wisdom available to everyone. Thank you for changing the mantras in my head from self-hate to devotional love for Krishna. That's a big one.
That's
We
great.
got different mantras in our head that are not serving us. Time to change them up. My question is for both Raghunath and Kaustubha. I recently graduated from college, and knowing what I know about Krishna, I am feeling somewhat lost about what to do with this lifetime. What is your advice for a young man, age 22, starting out on a bhakti path? That is the question. Don't you feel like we suffer from too many choices? Not like we don't have enough choices, but like there's too many choices. There's so much pain in having choices, and this is what we've sort of created in our world today. Kaustubha, what would be your answer to Emil?
I appreciate Emil's question. I like the way that he's thinking, I like that he's thinking, okay, I got this lifetime. Let me figure out how I'm going to make the best use of it. And, because he didn't give us a lot of info, like he didn't tell us what he studied or what his passions are in life or anything like that. So our answers will have to be, pretty general. But, here's something. This is my own experience, is that you can get into bhakti like kind of halfway, or you can get into it the whole way. And what I mean by that is not necessarily.
What am I in?
Oh, you're all in, guy.
Are you sure?
Break. Yeah, absolutely.
I was like, oh man, he's calling me out right now. He called me the halfway guy.
So those loops of self-hatred right there, whatever you call it. No, you're all in. And what I mean by that, and I want to be really clear about this, that doesn't necessarily mean whether or not you're married, have a family, have a job that's not directly related to, that's not what I'm talking about. But what I'm talking about is that your priorities, your life is built around your practice of bhakti. Your life is built around your service to God. That's your priority. That becomes your true north. That becomes, like, I don't know how many analogies and metaphors I can throw out, but like that central, that it's the center of your life. You build your life around that. And I find that and for other people, and this is fine too, I'm not criticizing, but for other people, it'd be like, bhakti is a nice aspect of their life. It's something that they do. I don't know if recreationally is the right term, but like,
I'm a recreational bhakti.
but it's like, it's a nice
practitioner.
part of their life. It's a nice aspect of their life, but their life isn't necessarily built around it. But this is my observation from my own personal experience and from observing lots of people for a long time that practice bhakti, is that if you really give your life to it, make it your number one priority and build your life around it, you'll find that magic things will happen in your life and that you'll be protected at every step of your life, and so, then the question is, well, how do I do that? And this is a sensitive subject, and it's a sensitive issue, but it's really about finding people that you really respect and trust that are practicing bhakti, people that you really admire. You admire their character, you admire how they live, and you try to serve them, right? It's, in one sense, it's as simple as that. You just try to serve them. Now, the fact is that we live in a world where trust is like hard to find, hard to come by. If our trust has been, somehow lost at some point in our life, we find it hard to give again. But it's a fact that if you can find people that you really admire and really respect and really trust, and you just try to serve them, the power of the process can really take off in dynamic ways. So that would be my first thing I would say, is that that's a very general idea, but one, see if you can, if you have that inspiration, try to give your entire life to, try to build your life around it. Two, find someone that you can really admire and trust that's following this path, and just ask them how you can serve. And I would say, and this is a little bit more specific, but I would say that, okay, you just graduated from college. You have apparently maybe no immediate full-time commitments. And it might be an opportunity that if you can give some time, a year or two, or even a few months, to get some good solid ashram training. And now you'd have to find the right place for that and so on. But if you can do that, it can make a difference for a lifetime too. So those are some thoughts I have. What are your thoughts, Raghu?
I like that. I always tell my kids too, hey, if you got a year, go live in an ashram for a year.
Yeah.
It's like you got nothing to lose, and it's hard to do once you're married and you have kids. You can't live in an ashram or go on pilgrimage or do things like that really set some scars deep, because already you can see this person, Emil, they've been touched by bhakti. And you can tell it's already the fact that they're even questioning. Most people, it's like they just go to school and then they go to college and then they get a career, and then they might start to question, why am I even in this career? And they feel like they've climbed this massive ladder, which takes time, takes resources, takes our energy, takes our thoughts, and we're like, we don't even know why we're here. And so his question is like he's lucky he's asking it now, but it's one of those questions we should be asking in childhood. Who am I? Why am I here? What am I good at? And what do I want to contribute in this world? Yeah. Like, what do I really want to contribute? And as you develop more of because let's face it, whatever you got something. I know Kaustubha's initiating guru. This guy was so smart. He passed away, but we loved him. But he was so smart. If he was in the material world, he could have run a massive corporation with thousands of people working for him. He just knew how to manage things. Some people, I don't have that. I'm not great at managing things, but we all have some talent. But I was thinking he could have done that and been good at it, but he just got dedicated to becoming a servant, and he used all that managing skills in developing ashrams and traveling the world and being a teacher and changing people's lives. So to the degree that we get really fine-tuned on who we are, our connection with the Supreme, then all of a sudden we engage that in whatever you're good at anyway. If you're a great artist, you'll be painting pictures about, Krishna or transcendental pictures. And if you're a great musician, your music will be geared more towards liberating yourself through music and other people through the music. So really, I think what you're doing now is the most important. You're getting really connected, and that will change the trajectory of all your future steps in this world. It is the most important question in life. Who am I? What is my relationship? What am I here to contribute? Especially if you're at this age, it's going to be different for different people. Some people are already settled in a career, settled in a family, settled in all those things. So they have to maybe rethink that. But at this, he's in sort of a very new green era of life,
Yeah.
It's exciting.
Okay.
I hope that was useful.
Yeah.
All right. There's a second one.
Should I read the question? The next one?
Oh, it's from David Cameron, a daily Zoomer.
That's right.
And model for our t-shirts. By the way, we have merchandise. You can support the show also by buying some merchandise. You just got to go to supersoul.merchnow.com. supersoul.merchnow.com.
The new Ramones one.
We got a new Ramones shirt. The Wisdom of the Sage is Ramones.
Right.
And
You ready?
and a tote.
A tote bag, yeah.
That's right.
Okay, you ready?
We got to figure out how to keep the show going. I'm ready to do a dance. Whatever anybody needs.
So this is from David Cameron, Daily Zoomer.
Okay.
He asks for both. He says this question is for both Raghunath and Kaustubha. I would love to hear a bit more about your own respective spiritual practices. All right, we're getting right into our lives here, Raghunath. All right, we want to hear the details. What does spiritual practice look like for each of you today? How has that changed, evolved, grown over the last few decades? And how have you dealt with those inevitable times when you have been compelled to leave either your particular spiritual path or spirituality altogether? You want to start it off, Raghu?
Yeah. How my spiritual life look for me today? Well, today I gave a satsang last night.
Okay.
I mean, I'll just go into it because if you find a piece of a day, you get a piece of the person's life. I gave a satsang last night. Bob Healy came. We stayed at Andrea Kay's house. We came home. We worked out a little bit, exercised a little bit at 9 o'clock at night. I woke up and chanted 12 rounds of japa. I took a shower and listened to lectures in the shower. While I'm in the shower, I have lectures playing.
What'd you hear today?
Just this interesting Swami I've been listening to.
What kind of interesting Swami?
Interesting guy. I'm not gonna tell
Okay.
you. And then I didn't bring my deities with me, so at home I have a puja that I do. I sat in meditation and did the puja in my mind. And then I listened to Bob. Bob gives a Bhagavad Gita class on Saturday morning, so I listened to the Bhagavad Gita class for a half hour. And I drank about 4 cups of hot water as my morning beverage. That was my morning. Now, that's part 1 of the question, but part 2 of the question I can really specialize in, which is, have you ever drifted away from your spiritual
No. Part 2 of the question is, how has that changed, evolved, or grown over the last few decades?
Well, decades. When I was in ashram, it was much more rigid. Of course, then when I get married, had kids, at one point it just became oblivious and just piecemealing it together wherever I could. Doing the show has been very beneficial because there's a bunch of accountability here. It's like I have to show up and talk about the Bhagavatam, hear the Bhagavatam, read and prepare for the Bhagavatam every day. So I'm appreciating where I'm going as I'm getting older, and I just want to do it more. And I think it's important as I get older to turn it back up. Where sometimes within the material life and raising kids and taking them to soccer and driving back and forth to school and stuff like that, you can really, being present as a parent is also part of your spiritual life. We have to broaden the frame also. But there are certain types of self-care, and I don't mean a mani and a pedi of self-care. I mean like your self-meditation, your own personal reading and stuff that has to be like fixed in your life on a regular basis. So Wisdom of Sages is really serving that well for me, and I think it's serving for a lot of people who just can't get to a Bhagavatam class or have time to read the Bhagavatam. They might have time to drive to work and put on Wisdom of the Sages and hopefully get some nectar from there. So that's how it's changed in the last decades. And the third one?
That's the one about, and how have you dealt with those inevitable times when you have been compelled to leave either your particular spiritual path or spirituality altogether?
Well, by the way, they're not inevitable. They're because sometimes people don't leave their spiritual path, but everyone does go through some like little bumps occasionally and gets challenged. And first of all, we should see those challenges as blessings. We should see those challenges that we're going through as Krishna's hand-selected me to work through this big issue right now. But I've had a time in my life, probably 20 years ago, where I really suffered and really went off the deep end. And I like to blame the circumstances. But truthfully, in retrospect, I feel like you don't leave your spiritual path. As far as I'm concerned in Bhakti, you don't leave your spiritual path. You get asked to leave by Krishna. You get I'm sorry. And it's not by even breaking a principle. That's not why you get asked to leave. It's from having an offensive mentality towards other people on a spiritual path. Breaking a principle, people will be weak sometimes in holding together their spiritual principles. That's not that's not a big issue. Those become very, very quickly healed by Krishna and by the spiritual path. It's by becoming offensive and highly critical to Vaishnavas, to other people on a spiritual path. And it happens again and again. People get tricked. People who've been around a long time get tricked into criticizing, finding fault, holding resentments towards Vaishnavas. It should be big red flags, a big button going off. And I feel like I must have made some offenses for Krishna to put me into that place. And then what happens, you quickly go back into bad habits. It's not like you come out like, well, I'm just sort of enlightened now. No, you go back to bad habits and Maya like brutally kicks you. And if you have some sincerity, you hold on to something, unless you're incredibly arrogant. You hold on to something. And then if you hold on to something, Krishna gives you some deep lessons. Like I look at it back in retrospect. I looked at that type of Maya. It was also Krishna's plan for me to go deeper into some deeper self issues, which are very relevant in me as a parent, which I wasn't a parent then, very relevant in me as a speaker of the Bhagavatam, and very relevant. I mean, sometimes I feel like I can relate to a person who's really eaten dirt because I've eaten dirt. I can relate to them. And I feel like people who've never eaten dirt, I don't get them almost. It's almost like it's almost, what, did you fall from a higher planet? I don't get it. And so I feel like it gave me some type of life experience to realize I definitely don't want that. I want this. So yeah, I think that in retrospect, Krishna always has your back, and he gives you what you need. And sometimes you have to take a detour, or you're forced to take a detour, or you get kicked out because of your behavior and you take a detour. But when you resurrect that spiritual life again, you'll look at, actually, everything has been in Krishna's hands this whole time, and he's got such a great plan for me. And I'm so grateful for even the crappiest times in my life, because Krishna was with me and he was watching me, and he knew exactly what I needed to get me to some next level.
Nice.
How about you?
Okay, so the first part was, what does my daily spiritual practice look like? Yeah, I mean, like if you look at it as like a day in the life of Kaustubha, if you go through the schedule, I wake up early, and this kind of goes back to the last question where it was like, if you can get some ashram lifestyle going, right? at some point in your life, then it can carry with you. And even as you get older, it can come back even stronger, I think, right?
Yeah.
Because I was a brahmachari. It was 20 years ago nearly since I was a brahmachari, since I was a monk. But even, really when we started doing this show again, it started waking me up, and it wasn't even an effort, but like I wake up probably 3 o'clock latest almost every day, sometimes earlier. And it's not like I try to do it. I just wake up, it feels good, and I just wake up at that time. And I'm sure that has to do with, cause I did it for years as a monk, and it just kind of, as I'm getting older, it's kind of coming back to me. So I rise very early. And, what may be unusual in my schedule as compared to a lot of other bhakti yogis is I don't chant my japa in the morning because I usually read and prepare for the show. So I have a good, hour and a half or so to just read Bhagavatam or read other books. Or a lot of times I'm preparing for the show, but I go off on different tangents, but I love going on those tangents too, just tangents of study and, hearing, reading different things. Then we do the show, and then, there's, throughout my day, there's all kind of services to do. Usually in the afternoon or early evening, I chant my japa. I'll go outside, I'll go to the park and be in nature. I try to be in nature a lot. And, in the evening, wind it down, and also a nice time to read. I try to read Bhagavad Gita every day. I try to make my day, as I was talking about earlier, I try to make it, try to serve the devotees in one way or another. It manifests in different ways. So there's seva, there's sadhana. Seva means the service that you're doing. Sadhana means the daily practices like the japa meditation. I also like to be directly involved. The yuga dharma of this age, is sankirtan, is kirtan. And I love to go out. I can't quite do it daily, but I try to do it as often as I can. And I'm fortunate because in New York City, people are doing it on the street every day. So I go and join the devotees that do kirtan in the street every day. And these are just all kind of part of my spiritual practice: the reading, the speaking, the meditation, the kirtan, bringing nature into it as well, reflection and all that. They're all part of the practice. Second part of the question was, how has this changed or evolved or grown over the last few decades? This to me is real important. I've spoken about this in the past, but we have to get to some point in our life where our spiritual practice goes deeper, where it's less superficial, and you really start to dig into what it means to live like a true yogi. And to me, that has a lot to do with being able to move through the world with a steady mind, no matter what the externals are, being able to see the divine in every living being and be able to see God everywhere. And so while in my earlier years or even decades of practicing bhakti, I knew that stuff theoretically, I can't say that I was directly reflecting on it and contemplating on it on a daily basis and really trying to understand that more deeply, praying for it, working for it. That idea was really prominent at the forefront of my practice. But as I get older, that really rises to the forefront of my practice. And I'm very eager for the theory to become deeply realized so that I see the world through this. And so a lot of, if you're to ask me most fundamentally, how has it changed? I would say that at this point in my life, there's a lot more reflection and a lot more prayer aimed at that inner transformation. So I'd say that would be the major change over the decades. And I feel that this is important for a couple reasons. I'll just say very briefly, because the practices that I've been doing throughout this whole time, chanting japa, meditating on these names, reading Bhagavatam, hearing, etc., these kind of practices, they're very powerful and very potent. But if we can't absorb the mind in them, then we don't receive nearly the benefit. And so it's that peaceful, steady, even mind that is able to become deeply absorbed. And that has a lot to do with how we treat people and how we see people and so on. So I want the practices, I want to benefit more from the practices. And I also have realized, as the years have gone by, that you can't just, if you want to have an influence in life, an influence on the world, an influence on people, help change the world, it has a lot more to, you can't just tell people what to do. And other people won't tell them what to do either. They have to be inspired. And the people that really make a difference in this world, particularly in spiritual circles, it has to do with the depth of their spiritual realization. There's no substitute for that. And so I'm very concerned about deepening my own spiritual realization if I want to be able to expand my service like that. All right. Is that all right so far, Raghu?
Great. That was great.
Okay. Oh, and then the last part, how have I dealt with those inevitable times when I've been compelled to leave either the particular spiritual path or spirituality altogether? Honestly, I would say that I've never felt compelled to do that. I've certainly gone through my ups and downs, but I never felt that there was some other answer or I was eager to leave it behind. So yeah, maybe that's different for different people.
Yeah, it's like, so after a while, hearing the Bhagavatam on a regular basis, it's almost like you know too much. Now you know too much. It's like, even if people like get away from it, I'm going to try to enjoy the material world. It's like you can't anymore. It's like you know too much about the material world and its problems, and you're trying to, and it's just not going to work. In the back of your mind, Krishna's going to be like, "Are you kidding me? Come on!"
Yeah. Well, or it's interesting. It's almost like when you understand it clearly enough. And of course, that can be covered in a minute, right? Like in an instant, we could forget everything that we know. It just, especially because of what you're saying, if we're offensive to other living beings, we can lose all that we understand. But it is true that you get trained through hearing Bhagavatam that when your mind starts to say crazy stuff, you can look at it and saying, "Oh, my mind is telling me crazy stuff," rather than thinking that that's me and following that train of thought. You observe that train of thought. Like, my mind is telling me that I would be happier if I were doing this right now.
Yeah.
And you're just observing the mind saying that rather than like identifying with that message.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Prabhu. What's next?
All right.
What's next on the agenda?
I think you got a question for me coming from a recent favorite person,
Shantadevi Dasi.
Shantadevi Dasi, who we read from her letter to us the other day.
That was cool. She was the one who she went to Vrindavan and lived in Vrindavan for 20 years.
20 years now.
19 years, and she didn't even go there for Krishna. She went there just because she was studying this famous Ramakrishna or something, his wife, and she lived there, and she ended up in Vrindavan, and then she, like years later, being in Vrindavan, met Raghunath Swami, or in Mumbai, met Raghunath Swami, and Raghunath Swami explained. Isn't that true? When you meet a devotee and they can just explain the knot of spiritual, questions you have, and it's just like it's that perfect answer for perfect questions, but they explain it so lucidly that you're like, yes, of course, this makes so much sense now. It's just you got to meet that right person, and with sincere prayer, the universe, God, Krishna, whatever, sends that person to speak it in your language it could only be them, like me and Kaustubha. We were like hardcore kids, punk kids, from the music scene. And a lot of the music stuff was explained to us by other punk kids, hardcore kids, bands. Louis, who's on the show right now, they explain stuff, where if I met a Swami when I was, 20, I'd be like, who's this weirdo? But Krishna tags people to put into your life that speak in such a way that that's what you need to hear from that person, and that's going to shift you and make your life change. It's quite a magical thing.
It's that is what you're saying is so important. Just the idea. This is a very fundamental idea that when it comes to practicing bhakti yoga, don't misconceive of it as a process where you can isolate yourself and practice it on your own. it's all about connecting with another person or connecting with people. And it's really like, it's from bhakti goes from the heart of someone that has it to the heart of someone that desires it. You know, it's a heart to heart transferal from person to person. And so, she wrote to us, the Shanta Devi wrote to us another letter, right? That she said you don't have to read it, but very briefly, she mentioned that she was living in Vrindavan for a long time, but had never developed any Krishna bhakti, not even the faith, and
Amazing, huh?
and then something happened, like where like a building kind of collapsed, like and it fell on her and two other people.
Hashtag only in India.
And so I think the other two people died, and her leg was shattered, and it was because of that she had to leave Vrindavan to get the right kind of care. And so she ended up somehow, she didn't tell us how that happened, but she ended up going to the Bhaktivedanta Hospital in Mumbai. So you go to this place that is the center of all bhakti practice, eternally, Sri Vrindavan,
Yeah.
and you're living there, but because you're not with the right people, right, you never actually get this message and understand it very deeply. Then she goes to Mumbai, which, for those who haven't been there, is like the center of materialism in India, right? Big city. It's as westernized as anything in India.
Good street food. Good street food.
Great street food. And but movies, they've got so much there.
That's a great city.
No, I love Mumbai. It's like it feels a little, for a New Yorker, it feels kind of at home. But and so she goes to the hospital there, of all places, and there she meets Raghunath Swami, and there she discovers Krishna, and there she receives the seed of bhakti. It's amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so she has a question for you.
Yeah.
Yes, I see that to distill the motives is one of the main goals of bhakti sadhana.
We were talking about that earlier in the week, right?
Right. You mentioned a range of methods for doing that, but for me, I particularly appreciated your suggestion that introspection and reflection are important. It seems to me that one can undertake a heavy program of external activities and get some benefit from it, but if one can constructively evaluate, progress will be faster. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he's like a great saint in our tradition,
philosopher, writer, songwriter, so much.
Yeah, visionary,
judge,
high court judge,
family man. He did it all.
How many kids did he have? 10 children?
I think he had 9 or 10 or something like that.
So, yeah, sometimes people are complaining, well, it's hard to get into bhakti. I have a lot of kids. Bhaktivinoda Thakur had 10 children. I don't want to hear any more excuses, parents.
And he was a high court judge.
And he had a very busy job.
And he wrote tons of songs and books, and he did so much. Yeah. Renaissance man for Bhakti-yoga.
It seems to me that one can undertake a heavy Okay, where are we?
So Bhaktivinoda Thakur
emphasizes that the neophyte devotee does not evaluate or reflect, so he or she is often confused about what is favorable for bhakti and what is unfavorable. He says that the main difference between the neophyte devotee and the madhyam, or the middle intermediate devotee, is that the madhyam devotee has learned to evaluate and discern. How do we learn to introspect, to evaluate, and to reflect? I sometimes find that the devotees are reluctant to evaluate because they confuse it with fault finding.
In other words, evaluating other people.
Sure.
Right? And how we respond to them.
This is great. This is a great question. What is the difference between evaluating, discerning, discriminating in the positive sense? Sometimes we use that word, and especially in America, to discriminate against someone as a negative connotation. But here she means, I think it might be a British thing, that discriminate means more like discerning. And what's the difference between that and fault finding? How can we safely and constructively evaluate situations we may be involved in so that we can learn from them, but avoid Vaishnava aparad, meaning offending Vaishnavas? Any discussion on this topic will be helpful. Many thanks for all you wonderful efforts. I am elderly and somewhat isolated, so I look forward to your podcast every day. How sweet is she?
Yeah, we got to meet her. We got to go to Vrindavan and meet her.
Yeah, I'm going to bring her something.
Okay. So thank you for the question, Shanta Devi. So let's first talk about what she's referring to here. She's quoting it from Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is also drawing from the Srimad Bhagavatam with this analysis, that there's 3 levels of devotees. In the 11th canto, this is mentioned. One is called, well, she's talking here about the one is called Kanishta, which means the beginner, neophyte. Even it's said, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that person isn't actually even a Vaishnava, isn't really a Bhakti-yogi. But we call them that because they need to associate with the Bhakti-yogi. So they get pulled in under the wing. And then there's the Madhyam, means like middle. And then there's the Uttama, the highest devotee. And this is how they're distinguished. There's a really interesting verse. Archayam eva haraye, pujam ye shradheyate, natad bhakteshu chanyeshu, sabhakta prakrita smritaha. This is describing the Kanishta, the first level. And it says that Archyam eva haraye, pujam ye shradheyate. When they walk into a temple, and I think the distinction between the original, or the Kanishta, the beginner, the middle, and the highest, it has a lot to do with the growth from the way that people use these terms now, from religiosity to spirituality. Right? So the first person, the Kanishta Adhikari, says they walk into the temple, they see there's God, and they bow down, right? Archayam, the archa, the form in the temple, Archayam eva haraye, when they see the form of the Lord in the temple, pujam ye shradheyate, with faith, they worship. But then it says, natad bhakteshu chanyeshu. They don't treat the devotees or even the people in general with any kind of spiritual depth, right? They see God in that form carved in the temple. They don't see God in the heart of every living being. So that means this person's just a beginner. They haven't understood things very well, right? They haven't realized this very deeply. So it says, sa bhakta prakrita smritaha. They are a prakrita bhakta, a materialistic devotee or a beginner on the path. And then it says that the second level person, they can recognize, to some degree, they can recognize the depths of someone's spirituality and respond accordingly, right? When they see someone that's very deep in their spiritual practice, they respect and serve them. When they see someone that's on a similar level to them, they will develop firm friendships with them. And when they see someone that's coming along and that maybe they can, that's more of a beginner than themselves, then they're merciful and kind and helpful to those people. And if they also recognize they're people that are very inimical to the practice, then they'll respectfully keep their distance from those people. And so with all that in mind, Shanta Devi is asking, well, okay, but if I start to discern people like this, if I start to, put people in these categories, isn't that a type of, how is that different than fault finding? Then, oh, this person's like this and this person's like that and so on. So here's this would be my one piece of advice in regards to this. And this ties into the whole 12-step and the recovery thing that we're talking about. We should all assume that there's nothing in this universe that we haven't done before, right? I remember once I had a friend from when we were kids. We were friends in the hardcore scene. We were friends as kids together. We were friends as monks together. And then at a certain point, he not only left the life of the ashram, but he also kind of left his spiritual practices behind. He became heroin addicted. I would bump into him on occasion. I bumped into one, he's living in the street, right? I bumped into him another time years later, and I was in a grocery store, and he was behind the meat counter, right? Which is like almost unimaginable, transformation. And we saw each other, and he looked at me, and I could see he felt like embarrassment, And he said, just give me a minute and let's talk. And so he got off of work, he took a break or whatever. And then we sat out on the sidewalk and we talked. And this is what he said to me. He said, Kaustubha, there's nothing I haven't done. Right? There's nothing I haven't done. Meaning, in the course of his drug addiction, it leads you to do all the things that you think you would never do. Right? You cross all those lines that you think you would never cross. And he said it with real humility, and I think is that type of humility that's essential in spiritual practice. And so at whatever point we're at in life, we should all feel like, there's nothing I haven't done. If this person's here and this person's here and this person, I've been there. And I think people that practice 12-step, because, the protocol that they have in their discussions and because of the openness in the way people share, that it becomes like a forum where there is none of that kind of, that you can discriminate. And, one person in a 12-step program could turn to another person and say, you know what, I've heard what you're saying. I understand. I've been right where you are. And, I'm going to tell you something. It may be a little heavy or something like that, but I think you need to hear it, and then they can just share that, because it's coming from a place without any judgment of that person's character, because the person's saying, I'm not judging you. I've been there myself. I know that I could be back there myself in a second if I'm not very careful. And I'm going to speak some truth to you. You with me, Raghu?
Yeah. Usually they don't give advice in the 12-step meetings, though.
Well, their mentors do, and so on. Right. Maybe not in that meeting, but, but certainly they share advice with each other.
They share their own personal struggle generally.
From what I've heard from the people that I've spoken to, sometimes someone's going to say, hey, I know exactly what you're going through. And the fact is, you hate yourself and you got to get over that. And, this, whatever it may be, and so my point is this, is that a wise person and a person following a spiritual path is going to have to make, they're going to have to make distinctions, between who they place their faith in, who they respectfully avoid, who they're trying to help, who they are developing their friendships with. That's going to be necessary. But it doesn't mean that there's any sense of superiority, any condescension whatsoever in making those kind of discriminations. It's one's like, I've been right there. Right. I know what I could be right there in a second. And so there's absolutely no reason for me. We are all going through all these different transformations over the course of life after life after life after life after life. And, we've all done it all. So when I make a distinction like this, it's not coming from a place of superiority.
Yeah, it's not coming in indulging in it and almost like relishing that they are acting in this way.
Yeah. It's not there's no condescension involved, but there's just clarity of what's happening, and but from a place of humility. So that would be, that would be the number one thing that I would share, is that if we all can recognize that I've been through human bodies, male, female, from all different ethnic backgrounds. I've been, up, I've been down, I've been in the higher planets, I've been in the lower planets, I've been in animal forms, I've sinned, I've been a sinner, I've been a saint, I've been all these different things over the course of many, many lifetimes. And we all have, to be able to step back and see with that kind of perspective when we deal with others. It's that kind of perspective that's spiritually powerful, and from that place we can make distinctions without it being from a place of fault finding. That would be my suggestion. All right.
That was beautiful, actually. Yes.
All right.
Tricky. It's a slippery slope to discern without criticizing, without indulging in criticizing. Because once you go there, it's trouble. So yeah, oftentimes I don't like to hear. I'm delicate because when people want to talk like that, I'm delicate to even what I want to hear. I don't want to hear criticism, but at the same time, sometimes things have to be called out because they're affecting your life. Oftentimes they're not even affecting your life. You're just being the commentator on it, and for that, I'm not so interested. I'll just shelf it. Let God figure it out.
You ready?
Yeah.
This comes from David from South Carolina via email.
All right.
Firstly, I want to thank all of you for your efforts in putting on this daily podcast. I have been an other since the beginning of the year
All right.
and have recently become a Zoomer.
Welcome.
I have greatly appreciated the way in which you both make the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam so accessible. Thank you so much, David. The recent discussions of Canto 2, Chapter 9, verses 1 through 3 were absolutely fantastic. Great verses and really resonated with me. One of my takeaways from this discussion was that when we decide to stop pursuing I and mine and choosing to identify ourselves with things like nationality, gender, race, political party, et cetera, then we can start to loosen our attachments to this material world and start realizing our true nature. I come from a Zen Buddhist background, and part of our daily moment-by-moment practice addresses this very same concept. The daily practice is a combination of silent meditation and trying to keep the precepts similar to the Ten Commandments. The meditation can give us the awareness that we are about to choose to encourage our habits of associating and acting upon I and mine, and the precepts can give us instructions on how we can act, think, and live instead. So my question is,
You can use those.
okay, what are these precepts?
All right. I want to know. I want to join your Zoom call.
My question is, what practical method can you suggest to us that we can employ so that we can realize when and how we are encouraging our associating with I and me and other ways to act instead? How do you do it, Raghu?
Well, here's how I attempt to do it. First of all, when people get into political things or things having to do with gender and body types and stuff like that, I just pull it back to, I'm a spirit soul. I identify myself as a spirit soul. And therefore, I'm a spirit soul, and I try to treat every other spirit soul right down to a tree or a plant or an animal with a type of dignity. And as far as getting out of the concept of I, me, and mine, that also involves some type of sacrifice, because part of I, me, and mine is my stuff, is my identity. So we're trying to Maya is trying to make us create a false identity. I'm a body. I got a good body, or I got a bad body, or I'm good looking, or I'm bad looking, and I'm beating myself up over that. And it also has to do with the accoutrements of the body. I have a house. Check out my cool house. Check out my cool apartment. Check out my cool car that I drive. All these things have to do with an identity of me that's not based on me. So I'm not even saying get rid of the house or the cool car or the apartment. I'm saying that if we have those things, which can really, really like screw with your head. If you have a big, gorgeous estate, you can get really into your ego. It's really easy to do it. If you have an incredible car, you can get really into your ego. If you're, drop dead gorgeous, you can get really into your ego, and people will feed that ego, feeding the illusion. So wherever we're at, one way to purify of those things is, well, one thing is if you have a lot of wealth, you give wealth in charity, especially to brahmanas or people who are teaching spiritual things. You give charity. That's part of purifying wealth. Another way is you purify your home. You invite sadhus, or you invite people over for satsang, or you invite people over for kirtan. A lot of people you are listening already do all these things, And another thing is, let's see. You give some seva. You give, hey, I got some time off. I'd like to do some service. What can I do for service? There's people who, even part of our, people are part of maybe a temple community or an ashram community. Wisdom of the Sages is like a virtual ashram. There's so many people who do seva for us. We appreciate it so much. And it just really strengthens the community. Or they give charity or something like that. But they could do it in their own community. But the idea is, these things that people usually get bound with, all my free time, which I'm engaging in Maya, or my home that I'm like really attached to and identifying myself with, or my wealth, I'm chipping away at that and giving it back to what I really believe the true north, or where we're supposed to be going with our spiritual life is. And it purifies us of all those things. And yeah. Does that answer the question, Kaustubha?
I think it did. I think you answered it even without realizing it, Raghunath. But I think you hit the nail, because there's a verse that answers this question, right? Like how do we engage in such a way where we become free from the identifications with I and mine,
Yeah.
or these false designations, which are called upadis in Sanskrit. And there's that verse, sarva upadi vinir muktam, right? How do I get rid of all of the upadis, vinir muktam? How do I become liberated from them all, right? Sarva upadi vinir muktam tat parat vena nirmalam. Hrishikena Hrishikesha, Sevanam Bhakti Ruchate. It's through seva, right? Bhakti or devotional service means engaging all our senses in the service of the Lord. Hrishikena Hrishikesha, engaging our senses in the Lord of the senses. When the spirit soul renders service unto the Supreme, there are two side effects. Sarvapati Vinir Muktam, that one is freed from all material designations, and one's senses are purified simply by being employed in the service of the Lord. So it's a fact. I think what you said was all different ways that people can engage their senses in serving the Lord of the senses.
Woohoo! We did it.
Yeah.
All right. I might have to end here because it's
okay. I think we're an hour in anyway. You got a full schedule today?
I got a full schedule. Doing 6 hours, and 6 hours at the Yoga Factory in Pittsburgh.
Someone recording it for us? We should share this on Patreon. Some of it.
I'll talk to some of our locals.
Talk to Bob. Maybe Bob. Put Bob on that. Yeah. You can handle it.
And I'm excited for that. But we're going to have to bolt out there quick because we live out of town right now. I'm excited. I'm excited to be out in public with humans again. Leading a kirtan in a mask. Whatever. Thanks, everybody. Me and Kaustubha are going to come to your house, everybody, and have kirtan in your house. Invite us over, and we're coming to your house.
Is that the plan? I didn't know about that.
That's the plan. Yeah, that's the plan. How you're going to purify your home by having Kaustubha there, and Mara will make some samosas. Thanks, everybody.
I had a friend invite me over to his home yesterday. It was really nice,
Yeah. Agnostic front, buddy. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. And it's a great way to start our Saturday morning here in Transcendental Knowledge. Thanks for everybody. And there's a lot of people who did all those things. They contribute to the Patreon, or they do selfless service. And they even just hearing regularly is a great... We're sacrificing that time where the mind could be in Maya. We just try to hear some transcendental info. Thanks, everybody. I have great appreciation. All these people on Zoom. And yesterday I met a whole bunch of... There's so many others out there. It's unbelievable. The others are taking over. There's others out there. You just meet them on the street, and they're just doing their thing. And here comes Andrea Kay. She's dancing. Here comes Bob, the King of Hearts, King of Hearts. He's dancing. Okay, I'm going to have to pick up my computer. Come on, guys. Woo!